What if the whispers of your dreams were drowned out by the echoes of your past? Elizabeth, a weathered soul with deep-set wrinkles that told stories of heartache and resilience, stood at the crossroads of her life. At 70, her once vibrant spirit felt like a flickering candle, nearly extinguished by the weight of loneliness and loss. She had been a widow for 5 long years, and in that time, the blues that once flowed through her veins had turned into a heavy silence. The world around her felt indifferent, and her dreams of becoming a blues singer seemed more like distant memories than achievable goals. Elizabeth's life had been a tapestry of music and love, intertwined with the laughter of her late husband, James. They had shared a passion for the blues, often spending nights under the stars, with Elizabeth's soulful voice harmonizing with James's soft guitar strumming. But after his passing, the notes faded, leaving her alone in a small, dimly lit house on the outskirts of a sleepy Mississippi town. The creaking floorboards and peeling wallpaper bore witness to her isolation, a stark contrast to the vibrant sounds of her youth. The town itself was a canvas of struggles. With its dusty streets and faded storefronts, it reflected a community grappling with economic decline and social divides. Bars lined the main street, filled with patrons seeking solace in the bottom of a glass rather than the rhythm of life. Many saw Elizabeth as just an old woman, a relic of a bygone era, too frail to dream. Yet, deep within her, a longing simmered, a flicker of hope that perhaps her voice could rise once more, like a phoenix from the ashes. One day, while nursing a cup of bitter coffee at the local diner, Elizabeth overheard a group of younger patrons talking about an open mic night at a nearby bar. Her heart raced at the thought. Could she? The vulnerability of standing in front of a crowd, bearing her soul through song, felt terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Yet, the thought of failure loomed large. What if they laughed? What if the years had stolen her talent? But that night, something shifted within her. Clad in a faded dress that she had once worn to a dance with James, Elizabeth made her way to the bar. The neon lights flickered above, casting a colorful glow on the crowd that had gathered. As she stepped onto the stage, the energy of the room shifted. The music started, and with it, a flood of emotions swept over her. She poured her heart into the song, her voice trembling but strong, a raw declaration of her pain and dreams. The crowd fell silent, captivated. In the audience sat a renowned music producer named David, known for discovering hidden talents. He had come to the bar on a whim, seeking a break from his high-pressure career. But he found something more, an authentic connection to the music that resonated with his own life's struggles. Elizabeth's performance ignited a spark in him, one he hadn't felt in years. He saw not just an elderly woman, but a woman of depth, resilience, and untapped potential. As Elizabeth stepped off the stage, a whirlwind of emotions engulfed her. She had faced the fear of rejection head-on and emerged victorious. But that victory was overshadowed by a new conflict that loomed on the horizon. David approached her, eyes shining, with an offer to record an album. The dream she had shelved for so long was suddenly within reach, yet doubt crept in. Was she truly worthy of this opportunity? Could she handle the pressures of the music industry that had often sidelined voices like hers? This moment marked the beginning of a new chapter, filled with both promise and uncertainty. Elizabeth faced not just the challenge of reclaiming her voice, but also the societal prejudices that often overlooked the stories of older women. As she navigated this tumultuous journey, Elizabeth would confront her insecurities and the ghosts of her past, while striving to make her mark in a world that had long forgotten her. In this tale of resilience, Elizabeth's journey is not just about pursuing a dream. It is a testament to the power of hope, the strength of the human spirit, and the belief that it is never too late to reclaim one's voice. The road ahead would test her in ways she could never imagine. But it was a road worth traveling, a journey from shadows to starlight. As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth found herself caught in a whirlwind of excitement and trepidation. The offer from David felt like a dream, yet each moment of anticipation was laced with the jagged edges of doubt. The insecurities she had buried for years began to surface, gnawing at her resolve. Was she truly ready to step back into the limelight, or was she simply chasing a mirage of her former self? It wasn't just the fear of failure that haunted her. The realities of her age loomed large, casting shadows over her aspirations. The music industry had never been kind to women, particularly those who had long been relegated to the sidelines. She recalled stories of talented singers whose voices were silenced by ageism, their dreams dismissed as relics of a past that the world had moved on from. The thought unsettled her as she prepared for her first meeting with David. On the day of their rendezvous, Elizabeth donned her best outfit, a vibrant scarf that James had gifted her, a piece that still held the warmth of his embrace. Arriving at the studio, her heart raced, and she felt like a fish out of water in a world she barely recognized. The walls were adorned with gold records, a stark reminder of the successes that had eluded her. As she waited, she noticed a group of younger artists chatting animatedly, their laughter filling the space. Their youth and energy made her feel invisible, a mere shadow in a vibrant world filled with possibilities. David greeted her with enthusiasm, but as he discussed his vision for her album, Elizabeth felt an unsettling mixture of excitement and fear. Would the world still want to hear her stories? She had spent so long listening to the echoes of her past. Now she had to confront them head-on. David's belief in her began to chip away at her self-doubt, but still, a small voice whispered in her ear, "Who are you to reclaim this dream?" As the weeks progressed, Elizabeth began to write and rehearse. It was a process that tested her both emotionally and physically. The initial thrill of creation soon morphed into frustration. She struggled to find her voice, grappling with the melodies and lyrics that flowed through her mind. Each note she sang felt heavy with the weight of her years, as if her voice had become a vessel carrying both the joy and pain of a lifetime. Despite her internal battles, she found unexpected support in a young woman named Maya, a budding singer-songwriter who was also recording at the studio. Maya radiated a fierce passion that inspired Elizabeth, yet their friendship was fraught with challenges. Maya's vibrant approach to music clashed with Elizabeth's more traditional roots, leading to heated discussions about authenticity and the evolution of the blues. Elizabeth often found herself questioning her own beliefs, torn between the nostalgia of her past and the urgency of the present. Then came the setbacks. After one particularly grueling rehearsal, Elizabeth received a call from David, who informed her that the studio was facing financial difficulties and that her project had been put on hold indefinitely. The news hit her like a physical blow. All the momentum she had built crumbled in an instant, and she found herself spiraling into despair. She had dared to dream again, only to have that dream snatched away. In the midst of this turmoil, she faced the stark reality of her finances. The income from her late husband's pension barely covered her living expenses, and the prospect of investing in her music felt like a fool's errand. The fear of losing her home loomed over her, making it difficult to focus on her music. She was caught in a relentless cycle of worry and doubt, questioning her decisions and her worth. As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth began to reflect on the lessons life had taught her. Each song she had written was steeped in her own struggles, and she realized that sharing her story could resonate with others facing their own challenges. This realization became a small ember of hope, igniting the desire to fight for her place in the world of music, regardless of the obstacles. But even as she fought to reclaim her voice, the shadows of betrayal crept in. Maya, wanting to help, but also driven by her own aspirations, inadvertently revealed to a local music blogger that Elizabeth was struggling. The article, while intending to highlight Elizabeth's journey, framed her as a washed-up singer who was clinging to the past. Elizabeth's heart sank as she read the words, feeling the sting of betrayal from someone she thought was a friend. The emotional toll of these challenges weighed heavily on her, but they also stirred something deep within her, a fierce determination to rise above the doubts and judgments. Elizabeth was not just fighting for her music. She was fighting for her dignity, her identity, and her right to be heard. She realized that her journey was not just about reclaiming her voice, but also about redefining it, crafting a narrative that was uniquely hers. With each setback, she found herself growing stronger, learning that resilience often comes from the most unexpected places. Though the road ahead remained fraught with challenges, Elizabeth was ready to face them. She would navigate the complexities of friendship, the harsh realities of ageism, and the uncertainty of her dreams, fueled by the unwavering belief that it was never too late to reclaim her voice and share her story with the world. As Elizabeth grappled with the emotional aftermath of Maya's betrayal, new challenges emerged that threatened to unravel everything she had fought to rebuild. One afternoon, while sifting through her emails, she received a message that jolted. Her heart, David, was no longer with the label. The studio had let him go due to ongoing financial issues, and with him went any hope of reigniting her music career. The news hit her like a wave, crashing over her resolve and leaving her gasping for air. In the weeks that followed, the reality of the studio's instability seeped into every corner of her life. Elizabeth was now faced with the daunting task of finding new representation while navigating the murky waters of an industry that had evolved without her. Each rejection email cut deeper than the last, each one a reminder that the world she once knew had changed irrevocably. The music she had poured her heart into felt like a distant memory, and she began to wonder if it was possible to reclaim her narrative when the very infrastructure that once supported her had collapsed. The emotional toll weighed heavily on her, manifesting in sleepless nights and a gnawing anxiety that followed her throughout the day. She found herself staring blankly at the walls of her home, the vibrant scarf from James feeling like a faint whisper of a happier past. The shadows seemed to creep closer, taunting her with the possibility that her dreams would never see the light of day again. Each day became a battle against the suffocating grip of despair as she fought to keep her head above water while the currents of doubt pulled her down. It was during this tumultuous time that Maya reached out, eager to mend their fractured friendship. Elizabeth, however, was hesitant. How could she trust someone who had publicly exposed her vulnerabilities? Yet, as they sat across from each other in a dim cafe, Maya's earnestness struck a chord within her. The younger woman spoke passionately about her own struggles in the industry, sharing stories of rejection and self-doubt that echoed Elizabeth's own experiences. Maya had her own dreams, but they were constantly overshadowed by the fear of not being taken seriously. Elizabeth began to see that her own journey could serve as a beacon for Maya. Perhaps, instead of retreating into her doubts, she could embrace the power of their shared struggles. They could be allies, lifting each other up rather than competing for the same space. This realization sparked a flicker of hope, yet the fear of further betrayal loomed large. Trust, once broken, was difficult to rebuild. Just as Elizabeth began to contemplate the possibility of collaboration, another obstacle emerged. The music blogger who had written about her struggles was now spinning a narrative that painted her as a washed-up artist clinging to a fleeting dream, further spotlighting her vulnerabilities. The article gathered traction, and soon Elizabeth found herself the topic of conversation in industry circles. The very exposure she had hoped would help her rise from obscurity had instead turned into a shroud of judgment and ridicule. The emotional ramifications of this new twist were profound. Elizabeth felt the weight of public opinion pressing down on her, and it began to chip away at her already fragile self-esteem. She could almost hear the whispers, the doubts echoing louder than ever. Perhaps she was too old, too out of touch, too irrelevant. These thoughts spiraled into a deepening sense of isolation. She found it increasingly difficult to share her music with the world, fearing that it would only confirm the harsh critiques she faced. Yet, amid this turmoil, she felt a stirring of resilience, a defiant spark that urged her to push back against the tide of negativity. It was during a late-night jam session with Maya that they struck upon an idea. What if they collaborated on a song that addressed the ageism and judgment they both faced as women in the music industry? This project could be more than just a creative outlet. It could serve as a rallying cry for others who felt marginalized and overlooked. As they poured their hearts into the composition, Elizabeth found herself rediscovering the joy of creation. Each lyric became a cathartic release, a way to confront the very fears that had almost silenced her. The process was not without its challenges. There were moments of creative friction as they navigated their different styles and perspectives. Yet, instead of tearing them apart, these differences began to forge a deeper bond of understanding and respect. The journey was far from linear. Elizabeth faced moments of doubt, where the shadows of betrayal and judgment threatened to pull her back into despair. But with Maya's unwavering support, she learned to channel that pain into her music, transforming her fears into powerful anthems of resilience. Together, they were crafting something not just for themselves, but for anyone who had ever felt dismissed or forgotten, an act of defiance against a world that sought to define them by their age or choices. As they prepared to release their first single, Elizabeth felt a profound shift within. No longer was she simply a woman trying to reclaim a lost dream. She was a force, ready to confront the complexities of her past while boldly stepping into an uncertain future. The realization that she was not alone in her fight fueled her determination. With each note they composed, she embraced the possibility of not just survival, but a vibrant rebirth, a new chapter where her voice could finally resonate, unfiltered and unapologetic. One evening, as Elizabeth and Maya prepared for their upcoming singles release, a message arrived that would shatter the fragile equilibrium they had worked so hard to establish. The music blogger who had previously ridiculed Elizabeth had published a follow-up piece. This time, it was a scathing expose that scrutinized not just Elizabeth's career, but questioned her character, insinuating that her collaboration with Maya was a desperate bid for relevance rather than a genuine artistic partnership. The moment Elizabeth read the article, a cold wave of dread washed over her. It was one thing to face criticism. It was another to have her integrity called into question. The emotional fallout was immediate. Her heart raced as she felt the familiar grip of anxiety tighten around her chest. How could they be so cruel? She had poured her heart into this project, and now it felt as though the world was intent on tearing her down before she had even begun to rise. Maya, sensing Elizabeth's distress, rushed to her side, her eyes filled with concern. Together, they sat in silence, the weight of the article pressing heavily upon them. As the minutes ticked by, Elizabeth grappled with a tempest of emotions: anger at the injustice, fear of public backlash, and a deep-seated pain that threatened to pull her under once more. She felt the familiar shadows encroaching, whispering doubts that perhaps she had never truly belonged in this industry, that she was simply a relic of an era long past. But then, As if a light had flickered on within her, Elizabeth remembered the very reason they had decided to collaborate. They had vowed to challenge the narratives that confined them, to give a voice to their struggles, to stand together against the tide of judgment. She looked at Maya, whose determination mirrored her own, and felt the stirrings of defiance rising within her. "I won't let them do this to us," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "This is our moment. Maya, we can't let their words define us." Maya nodded, her expression resolute. "We have to fight back. Let's use this to amplify our message. We're not just making music, we're making a statement." In that instant, Elizabeth realized the transformative power of their situation. This was not just a setback, it was an opportunity to galvanize their artistry and stand united against the very prejudices they had faced. They would not be silenced or diminished. Instead, they would harness the negativity surrounding them to fuel their creativity, turning their pain into something powerful and resonant. With renewed resolve, they dove into the final stages of their project, infusing their single with the raw emotions they had both experienced. The lyrics evolved, becoming an anthem of resilience, a rallying cry that encapsulated their shared struggles as women in the music industry. They wrote about the judgment, about the ageism, and about the strength found in solidarity. As they recorded, Elizabeth felt a profound shift within herself. The doubts that had once plagued her began to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose. She understood now that this was a pivotal moment, not just in her career, but in her life. The public perception could no longer dictate her worth. She was reclaiming her narrative. When the single was finally released, it came with a bold statement from both Elizabeth and Maya. They addressed the article head-on, inviting their listeners to join them in challenging the norms of the industry. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in from fans who resonated with their story. This turning point had not only strengthened their friendship, but had also solidified Elizabeth's commitment to her music and her message. She was no longer just an artist trying to reclaim her past. She was a voice for change, ready to confront the challenges ahead with fierce determination. The world may have painted her as washed up, but she was standing tall, ready to redefine what it meant to be a woman in music, unyielding and unapologetic. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Elizabeth felt empowered to walk it boldly. As the release date of their single approached, Elizabeth and Maya found themselves at a crossroads, their newfound determination put to the ultimate test. The music industry's response to their anthem had been mixed at best. While many fans rallied in support, the backlash from critics who had previously dismissed Elizabeth loomed ominously. The tension in the air was palpable, and their social media feeds became battlegrounds for supporters and detractors alike. The greatest challenge unfolded during a live interview that would be broadcasted nationwide, a pivotal moment that could either solidify their place in the industry or unravel everything they had worked for. Elizabeth was to be interviewed alone, Maya standing by to support her, but the stakes felt insurmountably high. The lingering fears that had once plagued her resurfaced, whispering doubts about her worthiness. What if she faltered? What if the critics were right? The weight of their expectations felt like a leaden shroud as she stepped onto the set, the bright lights blinding her momentarily. As the host began the interview, the questions were sharp and pointed, probing into the recent article and questioning the authenticity of her partnership with Maya. Each question felt like a dagger, each accusation sharp enough to cut through the fragile confidence she had built. The host's skepticism dripped from every word, and Elizabeth's heart raced as she felt the familiar grip of anxiety tightening around her. But then, as she glanced sideways at Maya, who nodded encouragingly. A wave of clarity washed over her. She remembered the conversations they had shared, the laughter and the tears, the hurdles they had overcome together. This was not merely an interview. It was a platform, a chance to speak her truth. She took a deep breath, feeling the strength of their friendship surging within her. She had to confront not only the critics, but the internal doubts that had haunted her for too long. I think it's important to understand that music is about connection, Elizabeth began, her voice gaining strength. Maya and I may be from different backgrounds and generations, but our collaboration is rooted in authenticity and mutual respect. We're not just two women trying to make a mark. We're artists who share a vision that defies the ageist narrative that so often permeates this industry. As she spoke, she felt the tension in the room shift. The audience was no longer merely spectators. They were leaning in, captivated by her passion. Elizabeth continued, her words flowing with newfound confidence. She shared personal anecdotes of their struggles, the late nights spent crafting their lyrics, and the battles they had fought against societal expectations. It was a raw and honest portrayal of their journey, and the vulnerability resonated deeply. The host attempted to steer the conversation back to the critics, but Elizabeth was undeterred. Criticism can be constructive, but it can also be destructive. What I've learned is that we cannot let others define our worth. We are more than our pasts, and we are worthy of this moment. The audience erupted into applause, the sound echoing in her ears like a balm for her bruised spirit. In that moment, Elizabeth felt a profound sense of liberation. She wasn't just defending herself. She was standing up for every artist who had ever felt marginalized or belittled. The emotional weight of her past failures lifted, replaced by an empowering resolve. She was reclaiming her narrative, not just for herself, but for all those who had been silenced. As the interview concluded, the host, visibly moved, thanked her for her honesty and bravery. The applause of the audience rang in her ears as she stepped away from the mic, a triumphant smile breaking across her face. She had faced her fears head-on and emerged stronger, her bond with Maya unshakable in the face of adversity. Later, as they walked off the set, Maya enveloped Elizabeth in a tight embrace. "You were incredible," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "You didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for all of us." Elizabeth felt a surge of gratitude. This moment of triumph would not just define her career, but also solidify the unbreakable bond they had forged. They had turned their pain into power, their struggles into strength, and as they stepped into the light, ready to face whatever came. Next, Elizabeth knew they were just getting started. Together, they would continue to challenge the norms of the industry, not just as individuals, but as a force of solidarity, creating a space where every voice, regardless of age or background, could be heard. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Elizabeth felt ready to embrace it, armed with the lessons of resilience and the unwavering support of her friend. In the days following the interview, Elizabeth found herself navigating a whirlwind of change. The response to her heartfelt words was overwhelming. Social media buzzed with newfound support, and the narrative surrounding her and Maya began to shift. Critics who had once doubted her authenticity now found themselves at a loss, some even acknowledging the power of her message. The single, once feared to be a commercial failure, began to climb the charts, resonating with listeners who felt the weight of its themes. Maya, witnessing this transformation, felt a surge of pride for her friend. Their bond deepened, solidified by the shared experience of standing together in the face of adversity. The two spent evenings in the studio, crafting music that reflected their journey, the triumphs and struggles entwined in every note. As they wrote new songs, Elizabeth felt a sense of purpose that had long eluded her. But it wasn't just Elizabeth who experienced this revitalization. The duo's success inspired others in their circle, fellow artists, aspiring musicians, and even friends who had once given up on their dreams. Elizabeth received messages from women across the country, sharing their stories of resilience and determination, thanking her for being a voice for the voiceless. It was a ripple effect that she had never anticipated, and it filled her with a profound sense of responsibility. Reflecting on her journey, Elizabeth recognized the sacrifices that had paved the way for her current success. She thought of the countless nights spent doubting her worth, the whispers of insecurity that had once drowned out her passion. But now, standing in the light of her accomplishments, she understood that every failure had contributed to her growth. They were not merely setbacks. They were lessons that shaped her into the person she had become. As the weeks turned into months, Elizabeth and Maya began to plan a tour, not just to promote their new music, but to create a platform for other marginalized voices. They envisioned a series of concerts featuring artists from diverse backgrounds, each sharing their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs. This initiative became a driving force for Elizabeth, a way to give back to the community that had supported her and to amplify voices that often went unheard. In the midst of this newfound purpose, Elizabeth reconnected with her past. She reached out to those who had once criticized her, choosing not to harbor resentment, but rather to extend an olive branch. Some responded with grace, others with skepticism. But Elizabeth was determined to lead with compassion, recognizing that everyone's journey was complex. This act of forgiveness became a pivotal moment for her, a testament to her growth and the strength she had cultivated through her experiences. Maya, too, experienced a transformation. The success of their single and the ensuing tour opened doors for her to explore her own artistic identity. She began to write and produce solo tracks, encouraged by Elizabeth's unwavering support. Their friendship was no longer just a partnership. It had blossomed into a sisterhood built on respect, admiration, and an understanding of each other's dreams. As the tour approached, Elizabeth stood on the precipice of a new beginning. She felt a sense of excitement and trepidation wash over her, but this time she embraced it wholeheartedly. She had learned that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a strength, a bridge that connected her to others. The music they created together was a reflection of their shared journey, a celebration of every twist and turn that had led them to this moment. With each concert, Elizabeth felt the energy of the audience, a symbiotic relationship forged through shared experiences and collective healing. She marveled at how their anthem had become a rallying cry, a reminder that everyone has a story worth telling. They were not just making music. They were creating change, breaking barriers, and inspiring others to reclaim their narratives. As the final notes of their last song echoed through the venue, Elizabeth looked out at the crowd, a sea of faces illuminated by the glow of their dreams. In that moment, she understood the true power of her journey. It was not merely about personal success, but about lifting others along the way, about forging connections that transcended boundaries. As she stepped off the stage, hand in hand with Maya, Elizabeth felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was not just a new chapter. It was a recomio, a fresh start for both of them. They had weathered storms, faced their fears, and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever came next. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Elizabeth knew one thing for sure. They would face it together, armed with the lessons of resilience, strength, and an unbreakable bond that would continue to inspire others to pursue their dreams. In this journey of self-discovery and empowerment, Elizabeth had not only found her voice, but had also become a beacon of hope for those who dared to dream, proving that it is never too late to rise and shine again.